August 1963. You're a U.S. Army soldier stepping off a transport plane into the sweltering heat of South Vietnam. In your hands is a brand new rifle that the Pentagon promised would revolutionize warfare. It's lighter than anything you've ever carried. It fires faster than any weapon in military history. And according to the generals back in Washington, it's so reliable that it practically maintains itself. The rifle is called the M16, and you've been told it's the most advanced infantry weapon ever created. The Army spent over a decade and hundreds of millions of dollars developing it. Military contractors promised it would give American soldiers an unbeatable advantage over any enemy. But within weeks of arriving in Vietnam, you're about to discover a horrifying truth. But here's what the Army didn't tell you about their revolutionary new rifle. The weapon they claimed was self-cleaning, jams constantly in combat. The ammunition, they said, was perfectly matched to the rifle cause's catastrophic malfunctions, and the minor modifications they made to save money have turned what could have been the perfect weapon into a death trap for American soldiers. Today, I'm going to tell you the complete story of how the U.S. Army chose the M16 rifle, why it became one of the most controversial weapons in military history, and how a series of bureaucratic decisions and cost-cutting measures turned America's most advanced rifle into a weapon that soldiers couldn't trust with their lives. To understand how the Army ended up regretting their choice of the M16, you need to understand the weapon that came before it. For nearly 2 decades, American soldiers had carried the M1 Garand, a heavy, reliable .30 caliber rifle that had helped win World War II and fight the Korean War. The Garand was a proven weapon, but by the 1950s, it was becoming obsolete. The problem wasn't the Garand's reliability, it was its limitations. The rifle weighed over 9 pounds, fired slowly, and used heavy ammunition that limited how much soldiers could carry. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had developed the AK-47, a lightweight automatic rifle that could fire 600 rounds per minute and was simple enough for peasant soldiers to maintain in jungle conditions. American military planners realized they needed a new rifle that could match the AK-47's firepower while maintaining the accuracy and reliability that American soldiers expected. The weapon they were looking for would need to be lightweight, fully automatic, accurate at long range, and reliable in any environment. It seemed like an impossible combination of requirements, but one man believed he could deliver it. That man was Eugene Stoner, a brilliant engineer working for a small California company called Armalite. Stoner had revolutionary ideas about rifle design that challenged every assumption the military had about infantry weapons. Instead of using heavy steel and wood construction, he proposed using lightweight aluminum and plastic. Instead of traditional ammunition, he wanted to use a smaller, faster bullet that would be more effective than anything previously developed. Stoner's design, originally called the AR-15, was unlike anything the military had ever seen. It weighed just 6 pounds, nearly half the weight of the M1 Garand. It could fire 700 rounds per minute in full automatic mode, and it was accurate enough to hit targets at 500 yards. When Armalite demonstrated the rifle to military officials, they were amazed by its performance. But the Army wasn't ready to embrace Stoner's revolutionary design. Military procurement officials were conservative by nature, preferring proven technologies over innovative but unproven concepts. They were also influenced by powerful defense contractors who had invested heavily in traditional rifle designs and didn't want to see their investments made obsolete by a small company from California. Instead of adopting Stoner's rifle, the Army chose to develop their own weapon, the M14. This rifle was essentially an updated version of the M1 Garand, using the same heavy .30 caliber ammunition and traditional construction methods. It was reliable and familiar, but it was also heavy, expensive, and difficult to control in full automatic fire. Most importantly, it didn't give American soldiers any significant advantage over the AK-47. Meanwhile, Armalite was struggling financially and couldn't afford to continue developing the AR-15 without military contracts. In 1959, they sold the rights to the rifle to Colt Manufacturing, a larger company with better connections to the Pentagon. Colt immediately began marketing the rifle to military and law enforcement agencies around the world, and they found eager customers. The first major customer for the AR-15 wasn't the U.S. Army. It was the U.S. Air Force. Air Force officials were looking for a lightweight rifle for base security and special operations, and the AR-15 seemed perfect for their needs. They ordered 8,500 rifles and were extremely satisfied with their performance. The Air Force designation for the rifle was the M16. The success of the M16 with the Air Force caught the attention of Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, who was frustrated with the Army's slow progress in developing modern infantry weapons. McNamara was a former business executive who believed in efficiency and cost-effectiveness, and he was impressed by the M16's performance and relatively low cost. In 1963, McNamara made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. He ordered the Army to adopt the M16 as their standard infantry rifle, overruling Army officials who preferred their own M14. This decision was unprecedented. Never before had a civilian defense secretary forced the Army to adopt a weapon against their wishes. The Army's resistance to the M16 wasn't entirely unreasonable. They had legitimate concerns about the rifle's reliability, the availability of ammunition, and the logistics of fielding a completely new weapon system. But their resistance also reflected institutional pride and a reluctance to admit that an outside company had developed a better rifle than their own engineers. Faced with McNamara's order, the Army had two choices. They could adopt the M16 exactly as Colt had designed it, or they could modify it to meet their own specifications. Unfortunately, they chose the latter option, and their modifications would prove to be disastrous. The most significant change the Army made was to the rifle's ammunition. Stoner had designed the AR-15 to use a specific type of gunpowder that burned cleanly and produced consistent pressure. This powder was more expensive than standard military ammunition, but it was essential for the rifle's reliable operation. To save money, the Army decided to use cheaper powder that produced different ballistic characteristics. The Army also made changes to the rifle's barrel, chamber dimensions, and buffer system. Each of these modifications was intended to reduce costs or meet specific military requirements, but they also changed the fundamental operating characteristics of the weapon. The rifle that emerged from these modifications was still called the M16, but it was significantly different from Stoner's original design. The problems with the modified M16 became apparent almost immediately when the rifles reached Vietnam in 1965. Soldiers reported that the rifles jammed frequently, often at the worst possible moments during firefights. The jamming was so severe that many soldiers were found dead on the battlefield, with cleaning rods stuck in their rifle barrels, having died while trying to clear malfunctions. The most common malfunction was called failure to extract. The rifle would fire a round, but the empty cartridge case would stick in the chamber, preventing the next round from being loaded. This malfunction was directly caused by the Army's decision to use different ammunition than what Stoner had specified. The cheaper powder produced higher chamber pressures and more fouling, causing cartridge cases to stick in the chamber. Another serious problem was corrosion. The Army had decided not to chrome plate the rifle's chamber and barrel, another cost-saving measure that proved to be penny-wise and pound-foolish. In the humid, corrosive environment of Vietnam, the unprotected steel quickly developed rust and pitting that made malfunctions even more likely. Perhaps most tragically, the Army had told soldiers that the M16 was self-cleaning and required minimal maintenance. This was based on the performance of Stoner's original design with the correct ammunition, but it was completely false for the modified version that soldiers actually received. The rifles required frequent cleaning and maintenance, but soldiers hadn't been trained to perform this maintenance because they'd been told it wasn't necessary. The reliability problems with the M16 became a national scandal when reports reached the American press. Families of soldiers killed in Vietnam began asking whether their sons had died because of defective weapons. Congressional investigations were launched, and military officials were forced to admit that they had made serious mistakes in the rifle's development and procurement. The human cost of these mistakes was devastating. Military investigators estimated that hundreds of American soldiers died in Vietnam because of M16 malfunctions. These weren't just statistics. They were young men who died because their rifles failed them at the moment they needed them most. The psychological impact on surviving soldiers was equally severe, as many lost confidence in their primary weapon. The technical problems with the M16 were eventually solved, but it took years of modifications and improvements. The Army finally agreed to use the correct ammunition that Stoner had specified. They chrome-plated the chambers and barrels to prevent corrosion. They improved the rifle's buffer system and made other mechanical modifications to increase reliability. Most importantly, they completely revamped the training program for the M16. Soldiers were taught proper cleaning and maintenance procedures. They were given better cleaning equipment and more time to maintain their weapons. And they were taught to recognize and clear the most common malfunctions quickly and safely. The improved M16A1, introduced in 1967, was a dramatically better weapon than the original M16. Reliability improved significantly, and soldier confidence in the rifle began to recover. But the damage to the rifle's reputation had been done, and it would take decades for the M16 to overcome the stigma of its early failures. The story of the M16's early problems reveals several important lessons about military procurement and weapons development. First, it shows the dangers of making significant modifications to a proven design without adequate testing. Stoner's original AR-15 was a reliable weapon, but the Army's modifications introduced problems that weren't discovered until the rifles reached combat. Second, it demonstrates the importance of proper training and logistics support for new weapon systems. Even the best rifle in the world will fail if soldiers don't know how to maintain it properly or don't have the right ammunition and cleaning supplies. The Army's decision to tell soldiers that the M16 was self-cleaning was a catastrophic failure of leadership and training. Third, the M16 controversy highlights the dangers of institutional resistance to innovation. The Army's reluctance to adopt Stoner's design led them to make modifications that degraded the rifle's performance. If they had been more willing to embrace new technology and trust outside expertise, many of the problems could have been avoided. The long-term impact of the M16's early problems extended far beyond Vietnam. The controversy led to major reforms in military procurement procedures, with new requirements for testing and evaluation of weapons systems. It also led to greater congressional oversight of defense spending and more skepticism about military claims regarding new weapons. The M16 itself eventually became one of the most successful military rifles in history. After the problems were corrected, it proved to be reliable, accurate, and effective in combat. The rifle and its variants have been used by American forces in every major conflict since Vietnam, and it has been adopted by dozens of other countries around the world. The civilian version of the M16, known as the AR-15, has become the most popular rifle in America, with millions sold to civilian shooters, law enforcement agencies, and military contractors. The basic design that Eugene Stoner created in the 1950s continues to evolve and improve, with new variants and modifications being developed regularly. But the early history of the M16 serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of bureaucratic interference in weapons development. The Army's decision to modify Stoner's proven design led to years of problems and cost hundreds of lives. It's a reminder that in military affairs, as in many other fields, the perfect can be the enemy of the good. The psychological impact of the M16's early failures also had lasting effects on American military culture. Soldiers who served in Vietnam during the rifle's troubled early years, never forgot the experience of having their primary weapon fail them in combat. This experience influenced military thinking about weapons reliability and maintenance for decades to come. The controversy also highlighted the importance of honest communication between military leaders and the soldiers who use their equipment. The Army's decision to tell soldiers that the M16 was self-cleaning when it actually required careful maintenance was a betrayal of trust that had serious consequences. Military leaders learned that they must be completely honest about the capabilities and limitations of the weapons they provide to soldiers. The M16 story also demonstrates the complex relationship between innovation and military procurement. While the Army was wrong to resist Stoner's innovative design, they were also right to be concerned about adopting unproven technology for use in combat. The challenge for military leaders is to balance the need for innovation with the requirement for reliability and proven performance. The economic aspects of the M16 controversy were also significant. The Army's attempts to save money by using cheaper ammunition and eliminating chrome plating ultimately cost far more than they saved. The reliability problems led to increased maintenance costs, reduced combat effectiveness, and ultimately required expensive modifications to fix the problems that could have been avoided with proper initial procurement. The international implications of the M16's early problems were also important. America's reputation for producing high-quality military equipment was damaged by reports of rifle failures in Vietnam. This gave propaganda advantages to America's enemies and made it more difficult to sell American weapons to allied countries. However, the eventual success of the M16 after its problems were corrected also demonstrated America's ability to learn from mistakes and improve its military technology. The rifle's later success helped restore confidence in American weapons and contributed to the country's reputation for technological innovation and quality manufacturing. The legacy of the M16 controversy continues to influence military procurement decisions today. Modern weapons development programs include extensive testing and evaluation procedures that were implemented as a direct result of lessons learned from the M16's early problems. Military leaders are also more cautious about making modifications to proven designs and more willing to listen to outside experts and contractors. The story of why the Army chose the M16 and regretted it is ultimately a story about the importance of getting the details right in military affairs. Small decisions about ammunition, manufacturing processes, and training procedures can have enormous consequences when weapons are used in combat. The Army learned this lesson the hard way in Vietnam, but the knowledge gained from that experience has helped prevent similar problems with subsequent weapons systems. Today, the M16 and its variants continue to serve American forces around the world. The rifle that was once considered a failure has become one of the most successful military weapons in history. But the early problems with the M16 serve as a permanent reminder that even the best technology can fail if it's not properly implemented, supported, and maintained. If you found this story of military innovation and controversy as compelling as I did, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the videos on your screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.